Good evening, brothers. Good evening, brothers. All right, my name is Willie Brewster. I'm coming here from Detroit, Michigan. I'm proud to be in the space with you, brothers. I'm also very excited about the panel that we're getting ready to have. But I do want to set the tone as we get ready to invite some of these brothers up. I do believe that we get the best quality when we set the environment right. So I need for you all to give feedback to these brothers, show love. If something resonates, give a round of applause. And even as I introduce them, I'm going to say, my brother, and then you all going to say, let's get it, and you will give them a round of applause. So let's practice this. My brother. Let's try one more time. I think we can get a little bit better than that. My brother. All right. So, up first, and when I call you up, just come have a seat at the far right end. We have Dr. Melvin Brown. Now, Dr. Melvin Brown is the current superintendent of Montgomery Public Schools. He previously was the superintendent of Reynoldsburg City Schools in Ohio. He has over 24 years of experience in administration. He also has an EDD from The Ohio State University, a master's from Virginia Commonwealth, and a bachelor's from James Madison University. My brother. All right, up next, we have Marquise Cooper. He is the senior pastor of Otter Creek Community Church here in Little Rock. He also is a school counselor at Carver Steen Magnet School in the district. He also is a mentor, author, and school counselor. My brother. Up next, we have former Teacher of the Year for Little Rock School District, Mr. Colton Gilbert. He is a debate coach and teacher here at Little Rock Central High School. He has his bachelor's degree in communication from Arkansas State University and a master's in secondary education. My brother. Up next, we have Dr. Eric Green, superintendent of Jackson Public Schools. He previously was also the chief of schools at Tulsa School District. He previously also served in D.C. He also has 2 masters in education from Howard University, an EDD from the University of Pennsylvania. My brother. Up next, we have a former Jacksonvillian. I was from Jacksonville, y'all, before I moved to Detroit. He is now the principal. We're in your school. Let's give it up for George Maxey. He has over 20 plus years in education. He is the turnaround specialist, y'all. He moved the school from F to a B in 5 years. He's done his thing, and I know he's getting ready to do his thing here. My brother. And last but not least, we have Ian Roberts, superintendent of Des Moines Public Schools. He also, y'all, we got Olympian. This is a former Olympian up here. Get ready to take the stage. He also has degrees held in from Harvard University, Coppin State University, St. John's University, Morgan State University, Georgetown University, and Trotter University. My brother. So as we see, we have an esteemed list of panelists up here. So I'm excited about the wisdom that we have in the room, because one thing about wisdom is that it gives us speed, both as an individual and as a community. So brothers, we thank you for sharing your wisdom today, and we also want to know a little bit more about you. So beginning with you, Dr. Brown, can you please tell us what got you into education and what keeps you in the field currently?
Great question. I got into education, my former life, I'm from a single parent household. My mom raised me in a trailer with no running water for the first 16 years of my life. And she told me that education was the only way for me to break that cycle of generational poverty. I was an Upward Bound student coming through high school, and upon going to college, because of Upward Bound, I came back from Upward Bound that summer to be a counselor at my former class with my Upward Bound group, and I was a teacher for that particular summer in English, and was not planning to do so. Got in the classroom and absolutely loved it, and that's when I went back to James Madison University in the fall and became an English major, and that's what I ended up doing. What keeps me in education is the fact that we have a group of students generationally who have been not given opportunity, who've not been given access, and have not been given equity. And I think it's my job, my responsibility to make sure that happens for each and every student. We have a lot of things happening in education now that are starting or trying to take those opportunities away from kids. And someone has to stand in the gap and have those battles to make sure we do what's right for all kids. I want kids to have an experience better than the one I had, and to recognize that whatever my accomplishments are, they can do just as well as me, because I'm not special by any stretch of the imagination. I want them to know that. So that's what keeps me coming back every day.
Well, I think for me, coming from Lee County, Arkansas, Marianna, Arkansas, born and raised, some of you all know where Marianna is. Humble beginnings, youngest of 22 children in my family. I always say that first and foremost. Because if you forget anything else, I think you'll have that locked in forever. And so coming from a large family, father never learned to read, dropped out of school when he was 8th grade. Mom dropped out when she was 11th grade. And so coming from a situation and environment where neither one of my parents actually finished high school. And so for me, it was always a challenge that you had to do something different. You had to go beyond the boundaries that were set for you. Only one on my mom's side out of her 12 children actually have a college degree. And so I've been in education for 25 years, worked at the elementary, middle, high school level, done a lot of things in different environments. But I will give credit to one individual, a lot of individuals in my life, but my high school counselor, Mr. Michael Rodriguez, was actually the individual who pushed me into the field of education. He came to me and said, Cooper, if I can find you some money to go to college, will you go? At that time, you know, money was limited. We didn't have money to go to college. So he found me an opportunity to go to Philander Smith College, was able to get a full ride through the Sam Walton Foundation, and went on to do some great things. And so Michael Rodriguez is one of the gentlemen that I credit for giving me an opportunity and kind of setting the stage way for what I do now.
So I never wanted to be an educator when I was in college. I tutored in math. I was a graduate assistant at Arkansas State helping with the debate team and the director of debate after I interned at a law office and told him I didn't like it. He said, well, maybe you should try teaching. You're great teaching math. If you can teach people how to do algebra and calculus, surely you can be a good communication teacher. So I taught at Arkansas State and loved it. And so after I graduated grad school, I started at Euler, and that was really why I got into education. Grew up in a two-parent household. Dad was a Baptist preacher. Mom was the CFO at the food bank. So education was important at home for me. So it was always important, but I never wanted to be an educator. But now that I've gotten in, it's year number 11 closing out, I think the reason I stay in is to give kids the opportunities and access to information and learning opportunities that I just never got. My first time having a black male educator was East Lab, my 10th grade year, and now he's an assistant principal at the school where I teach at. So I think that's important, and that's why I stay in.
Well, there it is. Good morning, everyone. I grew up in Flint, Michigan, working class family. My mom and dad worked very hard. They wanted the best for us, but they only knew what they knew. There was a limited, I think, view of what the opportunities could be to really build a nice life for yourself, career, etc. And so they pushed me hard and saw that I was willing to work hard and try to achieve. I went into college at Howard, attending to go on to law school, and found in undergrad that I enjoyed mentoring. I enjoyed tutoring. That's what really resonated for me. And so at some point I had to come to grips with, I don't want to be a lawyer. And I really only wanted to do it because I thought it was a really, the acclaim or whatever attached to it would be something for me. Anyway, reluctantly, but following my heart, I went into teaching and found after a while that this is the only thing that I want to do. This is the only thing that makes sense for me. An opportunity to live out my heart and passion and desire to do something worthwhile and something big in the world. I remain in education after 32 years. I remain in education because I still believe this is the only thing for me. This is the only thing that makes sense and the most appropriate way, most impactful way for me to create the world that I want to live in, and to help young people and families and communities to create the world that they want and need and deserve. I keep coming back because I do believe to whom much is given, much is required. I say it to others, but I believe it. And I understand that given that, you've got to make some sacrifices. You've got to put yourself out there, and you've got to be willing to take some shots, take some ridicule, and make some sacrifices in those things in order to serve in the way that we're called to serve. And I believe we're all called to serve. So that's why I stay in it.
Well, good morning, everyone, and welcome to Southwest High School, home of the Mighty Griffins, and just thank you for being here today. Reason for me getting into education, I have to go back to my Brooklyn roots, born and raised in Brooklyn, New York, and you know, school was hard for me in the very beginning. I had dyslexia. And, you know, back in the 70s, you know, they didn't have them IEPs and stuff like that. They just called you dumb. So I had a teacher in 3rd grade, Mr. John Fox. He just took an interest in me and worked with me every day for the entire school year after school. He just poured into me, determined for me to get it. And I got it. And I just remember when the end of the year and I passed and it was promoted on to the 4th grade. And I was like, we did it. I'm just like, happy, excited. And I said, what can I do to pay you back? You know, like I had some money or something, but I didn't. He said, only thing I ask from you is to give back. Pay it forward. Just pay it forward. And that rung to me, and I said, you know what? I want to be like Mr. John Fox. I want to give back. Now, understand something. Mr. Fox was not a black male. He was a white male working in the hood in Brooklyn, New York, trying to help black children. And I said, if he can do it, why not me? Why not me? So, hey, I live every day trying to be that person to change the lives of other black children in every school I've ever been with, and I'm so proud to be here to do it here at Southwest High School.
Good morning, everyone. Brooklyn Connection. I spent most of my formative years in Brooklyn, New York, and Guyana, South America, which is where my parents are from. I believe that my journey into education is the same reason that I'm still in education, and that is my steps are divinely guided. You know, I got into education because my mother always instilled in me that it's the one thing that no one can ever take away once you got it. And I'm the first person in my entire family to ever set foot on a college campus, much less to attend one. And I believe one of the inspirations that got me into this space is, as a student athlete, I had an opportunity to compete professionally. And I realized that at the point in my life where I, at one point, was ranked as the 8th fastest man in the world in my event, it inspired young men and young women. They gravitated towards me. And it made me wonder if they're having this magnetic connection to me because of my athletic ability, and I have the wherewithal to know that it's going to be short-lived, then what else can I do to make sure that I am still inspiring them? What keeps me in education, in addition to divine guidance, is the fact that as a teacher and school leader and district leader who has worked in a lot of what I call the Souths, in Southeast Baltimore and Southeast DC and in the South Bronx, I've had an experience where I started to attend more funerals than I attended graduation of black boys. In Southeast DC, I attended a funeral or a shooting every single year that I was there at Anacostia High School. Shout out to one of my amazing teachers, Tina Fletcher, who's from Anacostia with me. And I wanted to do something different than like everyone else here. I believe that those of us who are here on the stage, and all of you, we have a divine calling on our lives to make sure that we change the trajectory for every single student, more importantly, for every black and brown boy and black and brown girl, because they deserve it, and we're positioned to do it.
So, Brother Rob, as I heard you say, you're the first one to step on college campus, but you stepped on 6. So shout out to you for that.
I couldn't get enough.
So, brothers, we understand that as black teachers, counselors, superintendents, there's enough and a lot of demands just by nature of that role. Then on top of that, we add the invisible tax of being a black male in this role. Then we add on the additional layer now of the political landscape, in which there are direct laws addressing things such as diversity, equity, inclusion, critical race theory. What would you say your experience has been navigating these waters, and what would you say for other educators as they attempt to navigate these politically charged waters? And anyone who feels led.
I'll jump in. In having those conversations, I think it's important that we make people say what they mean. So when we were having the conversations about DEI, I got the question as a superintendent, were you doing the DEI stuff? I said, okay, well, tell me what that means. What are you talking about? And the person I was talking to, you heard crickets, because they really don't know what they're talking about. So I said, okay, well, let's talk about what we actually do. Our job is to make sure every kid is successful, no matter his or her background, no matter what they look like, no matter their sexual orientation, what have you. Our job is to make sure kids are successful. That's what I do. And I told one parent in particular who had an issue with something we were doing for a group of our students, I said, okay, tell you what, here's a pad and a pen. I just write down the names of all the kids you don't want me to educate. Well, no, that's not what I mean. Yes, that is what you mean, and I'm going to make you say what you mean. When the person started to see it through that lens and say, and they could see, we're talking about kids. We're not talking about concepts and ideas. We're talking about people. We're talking about giving back to humanity and growing humanity in our world to be a better place. Once that person realized what we were talking about, his tune changed. And all of a sudden, we weren't talking about DEI. We weren't talking about lack of inclusion. We were talking about kids. And I think it's incumbent upon us as educators, as community members, to challenge those things, to make people say what they mean. Because far too often, they get to throw out these little sound bites, and all of a sudden, that becomes the conversation. Even in the DEI conversation, many people who agree with me were all of a sudden parroting back to people this nonsense they were talking. And I was like, I'm not doing that. We're not going to talk about CRT because you don't know what it means, and that's not what we do. So I think it's important that we challenge those ideas, that we're not always defensive. Sometimes we go on the offense and make people realize the things they're saying have no context, have no fact. And if we're afraid to have those conversations, we're in the wrong spaces. I have a responsibility in my role as superintendent. And if I'm not sacrificing my work, so to speak, if I'm not willing to lose my job to make sure kids are successful, then I shouldn't be in the role. There are days I would love to lose my job, but that's another conversation for another day. I think we have to be courageous in that. And my experience thus far has been fairly positive because I push back. And I don't sit there and just take shots from people who don't know what they're talking about.
I want to add to that. I believe strongly in the notion that we as people, but we as leaders, are signal senders. It is our job to consistently, to regularly send intentional signals about what's most important. And that's by the things we say, the things we do, but also in the spaces that we take up. And the people that we're associating with and all of that sort of thing. And so while these are real issues, there are issues of equity and diversity, inclusion, and all of that. Those are real issues to be addressed. And I think in an ongoing way. There's not a one answer and you're done. I think we also have to be very mindful of these things being used as distractors and detractors from some of the real work that needs to happen And that often does not happen as we're talking about these issues. Because the reality is this little boy right here in this classroom still needs to learn how to read. And not just to learn how to read with great competency and deep comprehension, and to be able to use that in his life as he moves forward. And the same for this young lady and that. And so, all too often these issues become the smoke and the mirrors that get us off track from the real work. I don't have the luxury of sitting, running down to the state capitol and having these philosophical conversations about, what we could and should. I don't have that luxury. I have babies right here in front of me who, if I don't take care of this, there's no safety net. Nobody else is coming back to pick up the pieces and teach them how to read and how to count and how to think and how to present their thoughts in the most logical way. Nobody else is going to do that. And so while we can't shy away from these very real issues, we also have to be careful not to be sucked into them, and all of the energy and the smarts and the capacity sucked out of us dealing with the foolishness while our babies perish and our communities perish. And so the really important signals that we're sending around these things, we got to be mindful of all of that, all those sides.
So being a debate coach, just last month, I think, we were at the state tournament, and there was a kid from a school that I won't mention, but not in Central Arkansas, who literally had their coach come to me and say, we're not going to debate you all because we don't like the fact that you're a black student reads arguments about blackness. And so for me, things like that, I find as a teaching tool for my students, I could have easily become the angry black man trope and gotten mad. But I wanted them to see how to use the skills that I teach them to advocate for each other, for other people, et cetera, et cetera. And in part, that was why I joined the lawsuit challenging the governor's ban of indoctrination of CRT. And even then in court, like the Solicitor General had a very hard time articulating what critical race theory is, what related theories are, et cetera, et cetera. And having studied it in college, I think it's important that we give those kids not just the opportunities to learn these things, but also show them in real time what applying that does. And I think the real fear behind all of this is just they're afraid that we will learn or be given a grammar of the suffering that we go through every day, right? Taking the veil off of the kids' eyes. But I think the most important thing is making sure that we advocate for our kids and try to balance not buying in, but like balance not adding to the whole angry black person trope, because that tends to be a lot more counterproductive. But like he said, there's a lot of work to be done, and the more of us that are here, the easier, hopefully, that becomes.
I'll just add very quickly 3 thoughts, right? The first is just a recognition that diversity, equity, and inclusion, DEI, and so many of those other 3-letter acronyms have been sort of elevated to be sort of these cantankerous terms that just perpetuates political polarization. Especially for those of us who are superintendents in this space, right? We realize that it's intended to be politically polarizing. When you look at the states where diversity, equity, and inclusion and CRT becomes really these challenging terms, you see the commonality, right? Red states, Republicans, and we can go down the list. The second thought that we ought to come into this space and think about DEI around is the E in the acronym. I think the biggest challenge for many, regardless of what side of the aisle they sit on, is that creating spaces and opportunities that will be equitable will essentially disrupt the institutions and systems that we currently have in place and level the playing field. And they cannot, and you know who I'm talking about, live with that reality. And thirdly, if you do not have a seat at the table, or you're not able to have a place on the court, you cannot make a difference. And so the third offering that I want to give to you is to be politically savvy. And so while we know that DE and I will have so many powerful individuals who are politically poised to sort of challenge how we're showing up, while we're fighting and combating it, let's be smart. Because it is intended also to make sure that we are there pushing us out, those of us who are in positions of influence, out of our positions, and so we have to fight smart. Calling people who've had the experience, calling folks who are enlightened about it, but do not give up on the fight. We have to fight for the big E in DE&I, and that's equity.
One thing I want to just add quickly is also that I think is on a micro and microcosmic way of looking at things. On the macro is really on the political superintendent stage. I get that. But as a building principal, dealing with students with it, you know, we got to make sure that we protect the classrooms. We got to make sure we protect the grassroots teachers who are out there teaching their truth, keeping their faith, but more importantly, putting students first. So I think as a building principal, that is my charge, to make sure that we keep the integrity in the classroom where teachers can continue to teach. And we have to fight for that no matter what. Do not take that away from our teachers.
So yesterday we celebrated, or did we, the 70-year anniversary of Brown v. Board. I'm curious. Panelists?
I don't even know, brother. So here's the thing. You know, as people get older, and Brother Jackson spoke to some of this, you know, there are pains that you feel, right? As you get older, you've lived, you have some, you know, challenges that you experience. So yeah, we're decades down the road, are we celebrating? There are probably some a mixture of aspects to desegregation that we could point to. I would argue that there's probably more challenges that we've experienced than the positive. Certainly, the destabilization and kind of the disintegration in a lot of ways of Black community. As you think about the professionals who once were concentrated in Black communities and the businesses and just all the things kind of around that were built out of that professionalism that came from Black teachers and leaders in schools in the community, and as that started to kind of be pushed out, you see all the implications that we're still dealing with here today. You know, trying to find a church to partner with and be a part of the community in that school, trying to ensure that homes that people are living in the homes around schools and sending kids to the schools, all the things that were a part of our schooling experience decades ago that we're hoping and working towards rebuilding so that schools really are places that are hubs for the community. I would argue that, you know, that's one of the unfortunate experiences that we've dealt with since. I mean, I'm in a blackity-black city, right? Jackson, Mississippi is blackity-black. And we revel in that and appreciate that. And, you know, when you start to trace the funding that comes to our city, not just for our schools, to our city, you know, the number of times that we've had to close school because water infrastructure is not what it needs to be. Like, you can't just point to the current leadership of that. Like, where's the funding that should have been coming to and utilized in this city for that thing, for those infrastructure pieces for decades? We today are dealing with that, grappling with that, and I would submit that, you know, it has the traces back to some of those decisions, like that desegregation. I could go on and on about, you know, those experiences, but it's mixed, it's varied, it's layered, and some of the things that we once had, we've got to very intentionally, much like this summit for Black male educators, very intentionally push and fight and work to regain those in those schools if we're going to see the level of community support and power and strength that once were a hallmark in our schools and communities.
I think it's easy to say, in some respects, that the decision shows up now as if it didn't work. Because if you think about our schools now, they're just as segregated now as they were in 1954. But a lot of times we think about things in a very myopic fashion, A plus B equals C, and I don't think it's quite that simple. It's more nuanced than that. If you think about the impact of Brown versus Board, obviously it's desegregated schools, but also desegregated businesses and all sorts of things. There were reverberations beyond that. But the things that they get lost in the conversation are what happens from a systemic standpoint, such as redlining, Jim Crow legislation, how neighborhoods were set up, how neighborhoods were funded. So the result of Brown versus Board has, jumping off of what you just talked about, if you think about funding in schools, it's based on your community income. It's based on property taxes. And if we're redlining into a situation where more impoverished people are put into pockets where there is no wealth in that particular place, then the tax base is lower. So therefore, those schools don't get as much support as those in more affluent areas. Those are consequences, if you will, of Brown versus Board that systemically we don't take into account. We'll just say it didn't work, the legislation was bad, and here we are. But there's so many other things we've done as communities and as our nation that have told people from less affluent places that they're not worthy enough, they don't deserve anything, and we don't support those communities financially that render us to the place we are right now, which is why some of our schools look the way they do. If you think about what took place during the crack epidemic in New York City, it is not as if people just decided all of a sudden, hey, let's go get high on crack and ruin our communities. There were forces, political and governmental forces, that brought that into place. We ignore those conversations. We don't look at those types of things as impacts on what Brown versus Board could have done. I think the legislation extremely noble, and I'm glad it took place. But we also have to look at all these other things we've done as communities as a nation that have made that legislation less impactful than it should have been. And how do we dismantle those pieces of legislation and those barriers to certain communities so that they can't be successful financially, and they're always going to be behind others simply because of the way funding works. I'm in Montgomery. We've been underfunded for 40 years. We just got on par with some of our neighbors, some of our other districts in the state 4 years ago with some legislation that was just passed. We finally got some additional funding. We couldn't reap the benefits of that until this past October. As a result of that, we were supposed to get $400 million, right? That $400 million now only buys $260 million of work simply because of construction costs and inflation. We don't take those types of things into account when we're talking about the impact of it. And I think we have to have honest conversations with each other and with our legislatures to keep them honest. We need to challenge those situations and make sure they understand the implications of what they do and what they attempt to do later on. So I'm happy that the legislation took place, but I think it's important we also think about the other pieces that have eroded what impact that could have.
Well, and add one thing too, and great way of summarizing that, but also the one-offs from Brown v. Board of Education. And what do I mean by that is school choice. School choice has negatively impacted neighborhood schools. It just has, because now with school choice, it's called the brain drain, especially the black brain drain, where you take, parents who are a little more savvy, you pull your children out to go to a magnet school, pull your child out to go to other schools, and what do you leave behind? And then you come up with these rules and regulations of ranking schools, and you expect like the playing field is supposed to be leveled, but it's not level, because you have certain children who come in at a certain learning level that is at par, that's being tested, while some are 1, 2, 3 years behind. But then you want to be critical of that teacher, you want to be critical of that principal, more importantly, you want to be critical of that school, and then you label the school with all the kids in it. But it was all because he's like, oh, we're trying to create this level of equity. We want to create this premise or a lifestyle that, hey, schools should be equal and decent. But no, you made it worse. Mm-hmm. So now you open up the floodgates with school choice in regards to different programs and dancing and, let's not forget athletics, which is even worse. So what do you leave behind? So to me, that has been really the most negative impact from Brown v. Board of Education, trying to, in the minds of individuals, level a playing field, but you really didn't level it, you made it worse.
Let me, with brevity, say, and indulge my analogy, right? Years ago, I watched a special that talked about Jerry Rice having won the Super Bowl, and that very evening, the next day and the evening of the next day, he was back on the field catching balls. And the reporter asked him why not enjoy the celebration. And he said, because the celebration is short-lived. He has to prepare for the season that is coming. And I want to share that with you because while I, like many of you, want to celebrate this monumentous milestone of Brown versus the Board of Education, I want to caution that we think about the season ahead of us. Yes, we have accomplished so much, but the systems and structures and institutions that have been put in place will make it even harder for us to get to another real celebration, another milestone. As a superintendent who leads Iowa's largest school system, 31,000 students, we have students from more than 110 different countries, more than 83 languages are spoken. Almost 70% are black and brown. Yes, in Iowa. I know you all are thinking, what is he talking about? This is in Iowa. But what I want to offer to you, and building on the good brother's recent sharing, is we are still very segregated through the laws and policies and practices that are in place. This year alone, because of school choice and a school voucher program that was signed into law by the governor, we have lost $13.7 million taken away from black and brown students in the name of school choice. And so, yes, good brothers and sisters, let's celebrate, but like Jerry Rice, let's get back out into the field and think about the work that's ahead of us. What comes next? Let's prepare for the next season.
So, Brother Cooper, I'm going to start with you on this next question. As we hear about the impact of Brown v. Board, these DEI initiatives, or even just serving, it's a lot on us. It's a lot to bear as a teacher, as an administrator, as a superintendent, and just as an individual. I would love to hear, one, how do you take care of yourself in the midst of this? And then two, where are areas that you still, and we as a community still need to lean in to individually and collectively heal?
Well, that's a great question on, how do you take care of yourself? I think for me it's real simple. I try to detox as much as I can from the day-to-day things that I deal with. As a school counselor, and I know the superintendents and teachers, we deal with a lot that you guys have no idea of what comes into our office on a day-to-day basis. And so one of the things early in my career, I would take everything home with me. And when you take everything home with you, you end up dumping everything off on everybody else. You end up dumping things off on your spouses or your children, and that becomes unhealthy for them. And so for me, as I've gotten later into my career in education, I've learned to just detox. Just when I leave that workplace every day, I said, man, I got to leave something behind. Now, as an educator, because I love what I do, I'm going to take some things with me, but I have to detox. And then once I detox, I have to just simply debrief. Just take a few moments to debrief about my day, even if it's with myself. Just debrief about the day. What can I pick back up tomorrow? What can I do different the next day? Because our children, I'm telling you all, parents, educators, listen to me when I tell you this. Our children are dealing with things now that you guys have no idea what's going on. Now, I know it may sound crazy to you because you have children, but some of your children go behind closed doors every day and you have no idea what's taking place. When I grew up, Mama said, don't close no doors because you ain't paying no bills. Do I have anybody from that era? Yeah, you couldn't close no doors in Mama's house. You had to, because that's how it was. But our children now, they go behind closed doors. Technology is taking over this nation. The video games that our children play is taking over. And I know we got a lot of gamers in here. I'm not saying that. But what I am saying is you have to take time as men. We have to take time to debrief. And then the last thing I do for myself every day is real simple. Even on this device, I hit do not disturb. You have to take time to just do not have anybody to bother your safe space because you need it. These brothers on this stage, you all out here, You deal with a whole lot every day. I know you do. I'm looking at some of you all. I'm hearing some of my brothers share some of the things on the stage. Superintendents, I have no idea what you guys go through. Mr. Maxey, I know what you deal with here at Southwest High School. And as educators, you got to find the ability to just pull yourself back. Give yourself the ability to say, man, let me just have some time for myself, because we all deserve it and we all need it.
I mean, I commend you for being able to get to that place. I am feeling miserably. You know, this elusive work-life balance that we talk about all the time, I have not been able to get to that place. You know, we had a conversation this morning at our breakfast table, and we are still trying to strategize around what is absolutely necessary for us to find that balance. Because while the do not disturb is a great idea, let me speak sort of from a myopic lens, and that is the lens of the superintendency. We're on 24/7, whether we want it or not. Principals, you're on 24/7. And so for those of you who are out there that are aspiring school leaders and district leaders, I pray that you find the wisdom to get to the place where you can engage in work-life balance, because for me it has been elusive, and I'm always open to ideas and suggestions.
Yeah, a couple of thoughts. One, this is a really important question that we need to consistently interrogate individually and as a broader community, and of course as a field. I think a couple of things that I try to do to get closer to that space is, one, and I think it's maybe aligned to what you were saying, brother, I want to be clearer on what are the challenges, what are the stressors, or what are the things that are taking up space in my head and my heart. I want to be clearer on what they are, at least so I can put them in a place and you know, be thinking about what is happening and, you know, what I can do about it or what I can't do about it at this time or in this space. I have been working really hard, again, signal sending as a leader, really hard not to assume the role of Superman, not to assume it myself, and not to allow others to put me in that place. I am not Superman. I cannot do all things. I came in with that message to the folks as I was interviewing, and I've tried to live into that. That doesn't let you off the hook to, you know, lead and address and take shots when the folks want to shoot their shots. But it does help to manage expectations to some degree. And aligned to that, because I'm not Superman, like, we've got to create some kind of a team to where the superintendent doesn't have to know all the things, because I won't, right? I will never know what my early childhood people know about early childhood. I will never know what my counseling team knows about counseling. I will never know all the things that my high school folks know about schedules and this, that, and the third. I will never know all of that. And that's why we have a team. But if we allow ourselves to be put on that pedestal as the all-knowing, omniscient, omnipotent individual, then we allow more of the stressors to beat up on us in that. Last thing I'll say is just work really hard to narrate my experiences, my life, and the space I'm taking up, and my intentions in that. For me, first, reminding myself, why the hell am I here? Why did I take this in the first place, and why am I still here? Because every day you choose again. It wasn't back 6 years ago when they hired me. Every day I choose again to be here. Why am I doing this? Am I bringing value? Because if the answer to that is no, or I don't know, then maybe it's time for me to step away. But that kind of self-talk and narration around my why and what value I bring and strength and affirmations, thank you, Brother Jackson, affirmations, you know, without that, like all these other messages about how trash I am and how much I don't care about black people and how much I'm catering to the folks, the business, or whatever it is that the folks might say, like, you start to believe that. You should know better, but, you know, a healthy dose of that, you'll start to remember or believe that. So.
A couple things I try to do in addition to all this. One, I will be the first to admit openly, publicly, unabashedly, I'm in therapy. Because like Ian, I'm failing miserably as well.
Let's give it up for that.
I think taking time to take stock of who you are, what your experiences are, and what they mean to you is important so that we can have all of ourselves to give back to others. Two questions I ask myself is, how am I feeling and what do I need? And if I can't answer those two questions, then I got to take some serious inventory about what's happening. I think affinity groups are important. Groups like this is cathartic. So coming here, when Jamal called us about coming here, I was like, yep, I don't care what I'm doing, I'm coming. One, to have this experience with you, but also to have this fellowship with these brothers, because that warms my heart and tells me what my purpose is and why I do this stuff. There are days when, as a superintendent, which we are on 24/7, you want to just walk away from it. But then you have to ask yourself, what are you walking away from, and who is going to benefit from you walking away? And if it's only you, and that's what you need to do, then so be it. But I know my purpose is to give back and to make sure kids have an opportunity that I didn't have. So that's why I stay in it. But you have to take care of yourself in order to do that. We talked yesterday about working out. You went to the gym yesterday. I didn't get to go to the gym yesterday. It's a whole story there. But you have to stay physically ready to do this work, which helps you stay mentally ready to do this work. It's taxing. And our last day of school is on Wednesday, and I will celebrate quite a bit. And I'll probably have some liquid courage along with that to celebrate. Not too much, everything in moderation. But I think it's important that we're honest about what we're dealing with and have spaces where we can share that information and just be vulnerable. As black men, that's something that has not always been cherished in our community. We have to be vulnerable. We have to look at each other and say, brother, I know what you're dealing with because I do too. Let's talk. And how do we get ourselves out of those spaces? Otherwise, we won't survive, and we won't be able to do the things we want to do for our communities. But y'all know it's taxing, and we need y'all. We need y'all to speak out on issues. We need y'all to come and support, even when you don't agree with something. We can agree to disagree and disagree without being disagreeable. That's important. We need to, because I get called trash too, but that's okay. My mama used to say that from time to time as well when I wasn't doing what I was supposed to do, but then she loved on me, so it was okay. These people, whomever has those comments, don't sit at my table at home. They don't contribute to my well-being for my family. So, sometimes their opinions aren't necessarily that important to me. It took a while to grow that thick skin. But we're human, and it does get to us at times, and we need to be able to have cathartic moments to just purge and let all that out. Among these spaces is crucial to making that happening. I have another group that I talk to in a text chain where we share stuff, a group of superintendents from across the country. We talk every single day about something. Those moments to laugh, to cry, to just escape, it's important to have them because people are coming for you, and you have to have your troop, your team that's going to be there to support you.
Yeah. Brother Gilbert?
Yeah, the thing I'd add is I think as a community, like you said, we do need to take mental health a lot more serious than we do. Always being told is, suck in your feelings, don't cry, those kinds of things are just not productive. And I think for me, it took my mom dying for me to actually take therapy serious, go. And I think for a lot of us, it shouldn't take something monumental like that in your life to force you into those situations. And one thing my therapist always tells me is, I'm always like, well, we got a debate tournament here, we got this, we got that, I got after school practice until 6:30 every day. And she always says, that tournament will always be there, that whatever will always be there. You need to take time for yourself. And so for me, I read and run quite a bit. So I try to run about 1.5 miles, 2 miles most days. And I'm an avid reader. So I find those are things that kind of help keep me grounded, recharge my batteries. But I think overall as a community, we need to have a very open and serious conversation about mental health and how we talk to and about each other.
And one thing, I agree with all the brothers up here. The only thing I would add is my walk with God. I have to stay grounded with Christ is in my life. It keeps me grounded, being at church, just giving that praise, taking it to the altar, realizing that, I am not bigger than my job. I am not bigger. This building will open tomorrow if I die today. I gotta come to that realization, going back to, I'm not Superman. just having a good team around me and making sound decisions, trusting God, trusting the people around me to make sound decisions in the best interests of our children. That's it. That's the most I can do.
That's it. So in case you missed this, I heard therapy. I heard taking care of our physical health. I heard taking care of our spiritual health by actually investing in a higher power. I also heard actually processing what we're doing, whether that's reflecting, whether that's journaling, whether that's talking to an affinity space. So I just want to capture that because this is a serious thing for our communities, and we want to make sure that we're making a practice of these things. So brothers, we are approaching time, and I really wanted to take questions from the audience. So what I encourage you to do as you see these brothers throughout the day, stop and ask them questions that might support you and directly your needs. But brothers, as we get ready to close out, please give me a sentence or two about a piece of advice that you will give to just brothers in the room. And whatever is coming up for you that you feel is right for this moment, please share as we close out.
Sure. For me, I'll give the same advice I give my debaters, and that is the well from which you drink you did not dig. So whatever opportunities people have laid out for you, it is your job to cultivate those and create them so that they are better for people that come behind you, right? So whatever it is, you should make your life tangibly better for you and the people around you and for the next set of people.
I believe strongly in the requirement, our job of growing ourselves and being excellent in our roles. So also all too often we're looking forward to the next thing. Next year I want to do this. Next year I want to be that. I want to go on to this role. And that's great to have aspirations. Be great today. Be great in what you're doing today. Trust me, those opportunities will be there. Take today and get great at what you are doing as a teacher, as a leader, as a counselor, as a soup, as a elected official, whatever. Be great today.
I would probably say something to the effect, maybe outside of the realm of my professional life, is to be happy with who you are. Cultivate what you want to be as a human being and how you give back to humanity, and live on that. If that's your purpose, if that's your mission, all the other things will fall into place. Often we're climbers. We want to get better. We want to accumulate this or achieve that. Sometimes looking at yourself and saying, hey, am I happy with who I am? And if you're not, take steps to address that.
The advice I would give to all educators or anybody thinking about being an educator is a Cherokee proverb that I live with, and it sits in me and has been in me for a long time. And the proverb simply says this: if you listen to the whispers, you won't have to hear the screams. And so as black men, we have been given the task to listen because we have the ability to hear stuff other people can't hear. So I want you to take that back to work this week and really begin to listen to the whispers of your children, because they start off really small and then they just grow louder and louder. If you listen to the whispers, you won't have to hear the screams.
One thing I want to add to that was so powerful is that there's no drug, there's no thing out there more powerful than helping a child. And they tell you help them. When they come to you and say, thank you, I appreciate the help, you're the best coach, teacher, principal, super. They hear that come out of a student's mouth. It just makes you feel great. And feeling that level of greatness, I'm going to tell you, I can't see any other profession that can do that on a regular basis every day. So I encourage you, brothers, to continue doing it. And if you're not in education, I can tell you you're missing out. Yeah, we definitely do. I got some here in Southwest. LRSD.org.
You know, there's a Greek proverb that I often inculcate and remember and think about, and you all know what it is. It's, a society grows strong and stronger when men plant trees in whose shades they know they'll never be able to sit. What are the trees that we are planting today so that those young men and women who are coming after us will reap the benefit? And for me, the tree that I want to continue to plant, even in my role as superintendent is to make sure that I'm always prioritizing people over politics, past practices, protocols, and processes. We have to prioritize people over politics, protocols, past practices, and policy. And if we do that, we are going to continue to inspire not only those that we serve and lead, but those that are coming after us.
I want you guys to help me the same way that we introduce these brothers. Let's give them a round of applause as they leave. My brother, let's get it.